I hope you enjoyed that demonstration of what an invasion of the United States into North Korea looked like. The United States easily pushes the North Koreans back, and as we push them back and we approach the Yalu River, which is the river that separates China from North Korea, the Chinese respond. They'd been threatening a response for quite a while. Actually, ever since the United States and the UN had engaged in a peacekeeping mission, the Chinese have said that they can't let this action slide without a response. Stalin asks Mao, notice the proxy war again, Stalin asks Mao and China to send in troops, and the Soviet Union will be supplying air support with this Chinese invasion, which pushes the United States out of North Korea and pushes them south of the 38th parallel. We, being the United States and Douglas MacArthur, are totally unprepared for this. We're going to get pushed back onto the other side of the 38th parallel, and this is a major issue. I think this slide is fantastic. General MacArthur's armies were retreating in the face of overwhelming enemy onslaught, and desperate measures to save the situation were under consideration in Washington. On December 2nd, acting under the authority Truman had delegated, MacArthur ordered the United States Air Force to drop 5 Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs on the Chinese columns advancing down the Korean peninsula. Although not as effective as they had been against the Japanese cities at the end of World War II, the resulting blasts and firestorm did stop the Chinese offensive. Some 150,000 Chinese troops were killed in these attacks, along with an unknown number of American and South Korean prisoners of war. NATO allies were quick to condemn MacArthur's actions, which he had taken without consulting them. Shocking, an MPS kid doing that. And only an American veto prevented the United Nations Security Council from immediately reversing that body's decision, made 6 months earlier, to authorize military action in the defense of South Korea. The Soviet Union, under intense pressure from its Chinese ally to retaliate with its own atomic weapons, gave the United States a 48-hour ultimatum to halt all military operations on the Korean Peninsula or face the most severe consequences. When on December 4th that deadline passed, 2 Soviet bombers took off from Vladivostok, each equipped with primitive but fully operational atomic bombs. Their targets were the South Korean cities of Busan and Incheon, both of them critical ports supplying the United Nations forces. Little was left after the bombs fell. Faced with twice the number of casualties inflicted on the attacks he had ordered against the Chinese, together with an almost complete severing of his logistical chain, MacArthur ordered American bombers based in Japan to drop atomic bombs in Vladivostok, as well as the Chinese cities of Xinyang and Harbin. The news of these strikes caused anti-American riots to break out all over Japan, itself within range of Soviet bombers, just as Great Britain, France, and the Benelux countries were announcing their formal withdrawal from the NATO alliance. Not, however, before mushroom clouds were reported over the West German cities of Frankfurt and Hamburg. Crazy. That was a lie. That never happened. But you believed it for the 30 seconds I was reading it, because, see, this becomes the problem. Is how do you fight a limited war with countries that have atomic bombs? Again, that was a lie. Don't write that on the IB exam, but I'm trying to get the point across that how do you fight this war? How do you fight a limited war and a proxy war without starting World War III? In the late 50, early 51, MacArthur is going to fire Truman. Let me get that right. Truman's going to fire MacArthur. Truman's going to fire MacArthur because he is basically disrespecting U.S. and UN command, and that's the last major thing of this. The United States works itself back up to the 38th parallel, and the war drags on as a stalemate through 53, and that's where it's going to be left. There's complete, well, I don't know what the correct word is. No one quite knows what to do with this situation. If you do a full invasion into North Korea, you're looking at World War III. And if you use nuclear bombs, you're looking at a nuclear World War III. But if you do a stalemate, you're just sitting there. But you can't leave because, remember this slide back here, it's a political disaster if you leave. And so Truman is really stuck here with, you can't invade and you can't surrender. And that's going to become the problem with containment, and really the problem throughout the Cold War. The United States needs to engage and fight, but it never has an exit strategy. IB wants me to talk about the Americas' involvement. Okay, Canada sent a few troops, and Colombia sent some troops. There's no importance here. They're not running the show, but okay, so they were there. Great. I think the big thing that's going to come out of this is, I think John Gaddis, who is the big Cold War historian, I think he has it right. I think the slide is nice. The only decisive outcome of the war was the precedent it set, that there could be a bloody and protracted conflict involving the nations armed with nuclear weapons, and they could choose not to use them. The lesson was not lost, and Vietnam would be next, only this time the ending would be very difficult. And I think that's probably right. Korea is just kind of this, it's a protracted stalemate. It's a proxy war. It's really a war between the United States and the Soviet Union, where the Soviet Union, I think, is probing our resolve for containment policy. I think the United States is realizing that containment policy it's going to have to uphold, but to what extent? And then you get this, I think you get this realization that you have nuclear weapons, but they become totally useless in terms of using as an offensive or a defensive strategy. And maybe they're just defensive because no one's willing to invade you once you have them. Again, how do you get out of this? I think this becomes another problem we'll talk about later in some of these lectures, is we better remove military commanders from having authority over weapons. That'll happen under the Eisenhower administration. And I think this becomes the big one we'll see again and again and again, is that presidents cannot lose a country. So that's where we'll end up. After you're done with this, after you're done with this lecture, you'll see I've posted a little worksheet. You don't need to turn that into turnitin.com, but what we'll do with our next assignment is we'll compare the Truman presidencies to the Eisenhower presidencies, and we'll have you turn that in a short essay. Sorry for the production quality of this. I'm trying to get some other things. If you have a better way to do videos other than iMovie, which seems to be the best way, let me know. But for right now, this is the best I've got. We'll try to make these a little better as we move on and go forward. And again, looking for feedback. Shoot me an email. That would be great on what I can do to make these a little bit better, 15-minute or so lectures than just looking at a screen. It'd be appreciated. Until next time, friends, I'm around email if you need anything. Thanks again. Bye. My, that was fascinating. One could say that Truman was so dedicated to stopping communism he could hardly contain himself. Seriously, though, Truman's presidency is going to set a standard that all other presidents are going to follow. No one will dare deviate from the containment philosophy for over 40 years, and it won't be till Reagan that we start to see a different philosophy of rollback. Well, thank you for joining me today for IB America's Quarantine Edition. We'll have another lecture posted tomorrow. I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors, as always, Diet Coke, providing the energy to power IB America's students this entire year. Thank you, Diet Coke. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Cut.